So obviously this one, you can't recognize the graph because that's not one of the graphs that we've done before. It's just some random lines drawn. And they're telling us that this is g of x, and we're wanting to find and graph g of 0.5x. So now the 0.5, can you see, is inside the function. And what's going to happen is we're going to multiply x by, and 0.5 is 1 over 2. We always do the reciprocal. So the reciprocal would be 2 over 1. So we're going to multiply our x values by 2. Now in the graph that we have, there are 4 points easily labeled that are joined by straight lines. So after this graph is stretched horizontally by a factor of 2, if we can find out where those 4 points are, then we'll be able to just connect the lines afterwards. So if we think about the 4 points that we have negative 3 comma 2, looks like negative 1 comma 5, 3 comma 3, and 4 comma negative 2. We're going to multiply our x value by 2 and find out where each of these go. What's going to happen to negative 3 comma 2? It's going to change to negative 6 comma 2. So this point here, oops, that's too far, because we're counting by 2's, will be right there. What's going to happen to negative 1 comma 5? It's going to change to negative 2 comma 5. 3 comma 3 is going to become 6 comma 3. And 4 negative 2 is going to become 8 negative 2. And when we join these lines up, can you see it's been stretched away from the x-axis by a factor of 2? And the only point that remains exactly the same is the one right on the y-axis. There's another point where it intersects, but that's the only one that doesn't change from before. Domain and range for each. The domain for the red one and the range for the red one. Well, domain, the smallest x value was negative 3. And our largest x value is 4. Or in interval notation, square brackets, because those values are included. And the smallest y value was negative 2. And our largest y value was 5. On our blue graph, does it make sense that our range didn't change? Because the only thing we changed was multiplying our x values. So our range is exactly the same as before. But our domain did change. Instead of going from negative 3 to 4, now goes from negative 6 to 8. So the same thing happened to our domain. The x values just got multiplied by 2. Questions 4 and 8 can help you with this. So sometimes you might find it useful to make a sort of a chart of points and say exactly what you're doing and where your points ended up. For this one, you might have been able to just look at the graph and multiply your x values by 2 and be able to draw it. So sometimes it's going to be helpful to do a point-by-point thing, especially later on when we do all 4 transformations at once, when we stretch it and reflect it and move it left and right or up and down.